I think I'll wait for you to come just to hear that song.
I tell you what's interesting, what I was telling you about before. So this guy came out with a knife. He'd already cut somebody in the shoulder with the knife. Okay, they tried talking to the guy. They hit him with pepper spray. That didn't work. They fired those packets of the shotgun. That didn't work. They tased him. That didn't work. He kept came at him again. They finally had to kill him. And yet those cops are in trouble. Now those ones I don't agree should be in trouble.
He had to be on meth or something. They did.
I'm sure he was.
They tried everything they had to.
To not to escalate the situation.
Well, I don't have no problem with that. I mean, but the ones who just he's got a knife,
right?
You know, that's not necessary. If a man has a knife, you can hit him in his leg. You're a marksman.
Unless the guy's right next to you.
Unless he's like that.
If he's coming your distance now, I can decide where to hit you and stop you. I don't have to kill you.
With those tasers that they have now, they can hit you from across the room. I see my homeboy get hit by when it was a fight out there. He had nothing to do with it.
I'm glad I've never been hit with a tase, but I have been tear gas because the Army requires it.
And this guy, he's the police are there and trying to get order. He's running his mouth. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. They tell us, you need to just go ahead and chill. No, man, I can say what I want. They hit him with that taser. When he finally got it together, first thing that came out of his mouth, there was somebody take me home. And you're on, Bill.
Welcome, everybody. Again, this is Bill Moore, the host of You Decide. It's our weekend. It's the week after the Super Bowl and just before Valentine's Day weekend. So, an important weekend and some important issues that we need to be talking about. And I know you join me with being upset that Carolina lost. But you know what? There's always next year, and they got to be proud of a good season. Moving on from that, there is a serious discussion we need to have today. I don't know how many of you are even aware of it, but on March 15th is primary day in North Carolina, and there's also early voting starting shortly. But more importantly, there's a major bond vote that's going to be done during that primary day. So, and that's unusual, and we'll talk about that later. But just to give you a little bit of information, the legislature and the governor passed a movement, or a law actually, that put this on the ballot for March 15th. And what does it say? Well, it proposes to sell bonds to the tune of $2.2 billion, that's with a B, dollars. And they're saying that it will take 50 years to repay the bond. And they're also saying other things that are interesting, and we'll discuss them at some length now. North Carolina says that this is investing in their infrastructure. It is targeting long-term investment. Right now, there are very, very low interest rates out there, so it's historically low interest rates, and that's true. They say it will not jeopardize our credit rating. Something I am highly suspect. They say there'll be no new taxes. And they say it has broad bipartisan support, which means Republicans and Democrats support what's happening. And as I look at some numbers, that's probably true. And before we discuss this a little bit further, when you're going to criticize people, you also should say something that's true about them, and that's always been my belief. That's why the show is You Decide. We cover all issues. To be fair, the Republicans are doing the right thing. Our state constitution does require any bond vote to be put in front of the people for an up or down. So they are doing it correctly. They also should get some credit because the legislature has, in fact, lowered our state debt. And I think the biggest number out of that is when they took office, North Carolina had borrowed over $2 billion with a B dollars from the federal government to help to pay for those unemployment benefits during the heart of it, 2008, 2009, 2010. So we owed the feds about $2 billion when the Republicans came in. To their credit, they have paid it off. We don't owe that anymore. So they have lowered the state debt. Okay, so again, giving them credit where credit is due. However, some of my concerns bother me to a great extent, and I think I'd like to share them with you and see if it bothers you too. First of all, my first concern is over the date for this issue, March 15th. It is scheduled at primary time. This is a presidential year, so you will have a lot of primary voting going on in North Carolina, hopefully. But when you look back on numbers, in 2012, the last presidential primaries were held in North Carolina, and only 35% of the registered people in North Carolina voted. So only 35% of all North Carolinians who were registered to vote bothered to vote in the primary. Now you contrast that in the general election, which is in November, 68% of North Carolinians voted in that general election. So my first question is, why wouldn't they leave it where it was, put it the way they normally do, put it on the general election ballot so more people would get a chance to vote on it? Or is it possible that by putting it where they did, they were hoping less people would vote on it and they might get it through and pass with a minimum of hassle? So that's one issue. Another issue might be, and again, this is my speculation at this time, that by doing it this way, they will have it passed and they can start implementing it in time so that they would get some credit prior to the general election for doing the right thing, and maybe that translates into some votes. Now, a very interesting poll took place. I know you're all sick of hearing polls. I know I am too. There's a place called Civitas. It's a North Carolina-based operation in Raleigh. And in January of this year, just a month ago, or less than a month ago now, they did a poll specific to this bond. Now, they called 500 Democrats and 500 Republicans who were likely voters. And what do you mean by likely voters? Well, they have lists over the last number of years of everybody that voted, actually the whole voting rolls. And it lists there the number of times you have voted. You know, if you voted in the primary, the general election, we haven't voted in a couple of years, or you voted, every time. So people who most likely have voted, every general election and every primary election are most likely going to do it this time. So they become what we call likely voters. And so they called those 500 Republicans and 500 Democrats. Now, what makes them unique over other people is many people will just do what they call landline calls. Civitas actually has a formula they work, and 30% of their calls had to go to cell phones. Because as we know, there's an increasing number of households that no longer have what they call landlines. They live strictly off their cells. So they wanted to get a better sampling of the people out there to make sure their poll was as accurate as possible. Now, what are the results of this poll? Interesting numbers. And remember, this was passed by a Republican legislature with Democratic support and signed by a Republican governor. Okay. The first question was asked, will you support the bond issue? 66, or 2/3 of all the Democrats they polled said yes. 42% of the Republicans said yes. The next major question they asked is, will this bond raise your taxes? 67% of the Democrats said yes, they were sure it would. And 76% of the Republicans said, yeah, I'm pretty sure it will. Here comes an interesting number, though, that I will talk about at some length. The next question they asked was basically, where do you think this money is going to be spent? And they let people put down whatever they thought. What was interesting is over 50% of the Democrats believed that this money would be used for new roads and fixing up roads and fixing up bridges, or putting new bridges as appropriate. And 58% of the Republicans felt the same way. So over half the people on both sides of the House felt this was going to be used for roads and bridges and things along that line, needed repair or needed replacement or being put in for the first time, that were absolutely necessary. As our communities grow and as our parts of the state grow, better roads are needed. So this was assumed that this money was going there, or a good slice of this money was going there. Now, as you look at these results from Civitas, a couple of comments. The state specifically said there'd be no new taxes, yet most of the people believe there will be taxes. So that's an interesting comment in our belief in the legislatures. Okay. Another problem, and I believe that caused some of this problem for the bridges and roads issue, is they used the term infrastructure in their media hype, and initially when they first put it out, they used it infrastructure and they pulled it back and changed it. When you say infrastructure to most people, it just pops in their heads: bridges, roads, tunnels, and I think that's where part of the misleading facts came from. The bigger question is, if it's not going to roads and not going to bridges and not going to tunnels, where's the money going? Well, if you go online, there's a site run by North Carolina State called Connect NC, or NC Connects, either way. And this has all the information I'm quoting from the state is on that site. And again, just the term connecting NC, that sounds like roads. It sounds like transportation. It could be, sounds like maybe a railroad. Better roads, better bridges. Again, none of that's happening. So where is the money going? No. Statewide, $980 million, which is almost, it's 49% of the $2.2 billion, is going to go to the University of North Carolina system for new buildings and some renovation throughout the state. So every UNC campus is going to get some renovation. Most of the time, UNC wants new buildings. So there's going to be new construction on all these campuses. Okay. Another $350 million, with an M, are going to go to community colleges throughout the state. Again, for new buildings, maybe some reconstruction or renovation. And that's about 17% of this bond money. Where I find also a little misleading in their numbers, they announced there's $179 million of this bond, or about 9%, is going to go for agriculture. Well, when you dig a little deeper, and what do they mean for agriculture? Is it going to go to farmers? Is it going to go? No, it's not going to any of those places. It's going to be used to build new ag buildings and renovate some places or some labs in some universities. So again, another $179 million. This is going to universities for new buildings and renovation. $78.5 million of this $2.2 billion, or 4% of it, is going to renovate 3 National Guard armories in 3 different counties, and also to build a police and corrections officers training facility in Moore County. So that's, that's another whole construction issue. They plan to spend $100 million of this money for state parks and the zoo, to just upgrade state parks throughout the state, whatever work they think is required, and for our zoo. Okay. Another $312 million is going to go for water and sewer projects, and also to help local parks, the non-state ones. There might be a county park that might get some dollars or grants from this $312 million, and that's, again, 16% of the budget. So that's pretty much a general term where the money's going. They have broken down on the NC Connect site by each region: Northwest, Northeast, South, Southeast, Southwest, Central, exactly what's going into each place. For example, they'll say 150 million go over to the Northeast. It's going to affect X number of universities or colleges, and whatever, if there's any state parks, they're going to get some money. But it doesn't specify what's being done in any of those sites, just that the money is being made available to those facilities through the bond. Now, some further comments on this bond issue. The bond specifically says it will not raise taxes. Well, yet, as I told you, Civitas found out that 2/3 of the Democrats and 76% of the Republicans believe it's going to raise taxes sooner or later. And one of the reasons, it's going to happen is because there's no way that this legislature can tell a legislature 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now that they can't raise taxes to pay for this bond. So basically, all they're going to guarantee you is that the first year of the bond will not raise taxes. Okay? As you think further through on this, we get to the national debt issue that we have. And are we, in fact, raising the debt of North Carolina, and you add that to the national debt, which is $19 trillion, that's with a T. We're saddling our kids and our grandkids with a debt that they have to pay off. Is that fair? I'm not sure we should be doing that. They advertise it as 50 years of investment, paid for 20 to 30 years, depending on what bond is finally sold. Do you honestly believe the work will last 50 years and no other work is going to first surface? Do you honestly think for a minute that's going to happen? As a matter of fact, there is some talk up in Raleigh that in a couple of years, they might do another bond to pay for the roads and bridges we thought that many people think is in this bid. So they're already considering another bond in a couple of years to do road and bridge work. Let's talk a little bit about roads and bridges. Anybody that travels out there knows that most of our roads and bridges need some sort of work. Some of them need to be improved greatly. Some of them need to be widened. Some of the bridges we kind of go over and we hope they're going to be there when we can finish. And how do we currently fix them? Now, currently, the state government uses about $2 billion annually for road work, bridge work throughout the state. Now, where does that money come from? Well, they get about $1 billion of the dollars from the federal government through their programs that they have money available there. The other $1 billion or so comes from the gas taxes that we pay. So that's one of the reasons we have high gas taxes, because that money is turned back to pay for roads and bridges along the line. Now, a couple problems with this $2 billion issue. With the federal deficit getting bigger and bigger, how long can we depend on getting this $1 billion or so a year from the federal government to do our roads? And secondly, thanks to federal law, through our environmental issues, our cars keep getting better and better, and they get better and better gas mileage, which translates to less fuel being sold at the pumps, which translates to less funds coming into the state that can be used for gasoline. And another offside of this is our gas tax is the highest in the immediate area. So if you live anywhere close to South Carolina, or you're close enough to Virginia, or you happen to be up there to shop, you're going to pop across that line fill up your tank and save, 10, 20, 30 cents a gallon, depending where you are. So if you can do that, you will. That's less fuel, again, sold here. Another issue I have with this bond, there's not a dime in it for our public schools infrastructure or public school buildings. If you take a look at most of our public schools, in my opinion, the bond money would be better off fixing our public education schools, the K-12 program, than going into the university money at this point. I'm not saying university money is not a good investment. I am saying that our priorities should be higher, and that if you look at universities and you compare them to the schools, the K-12 schools that we're running, there's a reality that our K-12 schools are in much worse shape. And we're going to prioritize where our money needs to go from a bond issue. I would think it should go there rather than money going to the post-high school schools, or the colleges. As we continue talking about this, do you think this was a well-meaning attempt to address the many issues in North Carolina? Or do you think it's an attempt by our legislators to, quote, bring home the bacon just prior to the general election? And we don't know that for sure yet, but we do know it's an issue. I'd also like to share with you another thought. There are better ways for the states to fund important projects than by selling and raising debt. For example, in 2015, the state of North Carolina had a $445 million surplus, which they put away for a rainy day, supposedly. If we look for the surplus for funding and multiplied that $445 million by 5 years, we'd have over the $2 billion bond we needed, and we'd be no debt at all. Now, maybe you want to do it over 6 or 7 because there's always some rainy day issue that can pop up. But by using the surplus rather than just banking it for a rainy day, we are in fact not borrowing $2 billion, which our kids and our grandkids are going to pay off our great-grandkids, depending on how old you are. The $2 billion bond amounts to less than 10% of our state's operating budget. So there is room for prioritization. So we can cut funds and say, okay, let's do this project rather than that project and spread these projects over years. Because I'm sure they're saying this work could take 20 years under the bond and you're getting 50, paying for it over 50. Well, if we spread this out this way, we don't need the bond and the money exists. We are being told that our state has a 6% growth in revenue for just last year alone. It's kind of a contradiction to state that we have a surplus of money and doing well financially, yet we need to take out a line of credit, or if you will, a bond, to pay for things that we could just do over time, which is going to be done over time anyway. And another person you may know from the Northeast is A.J. Dowd. He's our lottery commissioner, and he's indicated that there's room to fund the college projects from the education lottery rather than take on the debt. His statement reads, "The portion of the bill that affects improvement of education concerns me. Having been lottery commissioner, I believe tighter physical oversight of lottery can provide more funds for capital improvement." Now, translation of that into everyday English, the man is saying that if we control the lottery better in the way it's and how it's done and cut back on the waste and whatever else, the fraud, they can save enough money to continue using that money for schools and put some into post-secondary education to help offset the cost of this bond. So this is a critical element we need to be thinking about. The vote is the 15th of March. It's primary day. We need to get out there. We need to vote. Whichever way you're going to vote is your decision, and I respect that. I would hope that what I've told you and spoke to you about today will get you to consider not supporting this bond and instead contacting our legislators and saying, find a different way to get it done. And let's not forget about our public schools, the K-12 version, where our kids need a lot of help, and the buildings and infrastructure need some major renovation. And I think that might be the case rather than putting in a lot of new buildings on campuses that look pretty good as you go by anyway. So anyway, that's my thought on the North Carolina bond. I hope that you heard me. Hope you'll support me. Hope you, but either way, remember the 15th is the vote. Get out there and vote. And remember, there's also early voting. And if you want to do the early voting, please do. But the most important part is vote. Now, if you're looking to verify any of the facts I've given you, as I said before, go the information on where the state bond money is coming from, where it's being spent, there's a program called NC Connect. Go to the internet site, and there's a slideshow there that basically covers what I've spoken and also gives you much more detail where the money is going to. For example, if we flip through the general areas here, they call them regional investments, and they break us down in multiple areas. I'll pick the Northeast because that's where we are. It says that it invests $152 million in the Northeast region, which is going to 6 community colleges, 2 universities, and 6 state parks. And it does list the colleges that, Beaufort, Halifax, Martin, College of the Albemarle, Pitt, Roanoke, ECU, Elizabeth City State, Goose Creek, Dismal Swamp, Jockey's Ridge, Merchants Pond Ridge, Pettigrew, and Medic Mountain. And those are the places that are going to see some money. It doesn't tell you what's being done there or how long it's going to be taken. But that information is on NC Connects if you want to look and verify anything I've told you. If you want to know about the polling results, please go to the Civitas Institute. That's CIVITAS Institute. They're North Carolina based. And just look for they have a whole bunch of polling there. They do polling on all kinds of topics. And just look for the one on the NC bond and flip through it till you find it. And it's got all the information that I shared with you and a little bit more about the program itself. So anyway, that's my stand on the bond and where we are and what we're doing. I really think North Carolinians need to get up on this one and vote. I don't like the fact that it's being done early instead of with the general election, because I think the numbers, the purpose behind it was to get less people involved in it. So if you like what I said, I repeat again, early vote, vote on the 15th, vote yes or no, that's up to you. But anyway, you decide, but you need to vote, and that's critical. So with that, we're reaching our first point where we get ready to speak to Dr. Stein. And a little bit different this time. We usually lead in with Thank God for Kids, but I wanted to take it since Valentine's Day is this weekend. And, I've been fortunate enough to be married to a very lovely lady for a lot of years. And I know that I did better than she did. And I know there's a bunch of guys out there that are very pleased with the ladies they found, either going to marry or have married and or considering marrying. And I thought I'd like to pay a little tribute to all of them for Valentine's. And there's an old song called Let It Be Me, done by the Everly Brothers. Kind of fits the Valentine's Day motif. So without further ado, Let It Be Me.
I got you.
Okay. How'd we do? That makes sense in what I say? That makes sense in what I was saying?
Yes. The parts I hear,
Oh, you're busy.
Yeah, always.
Well, the men don't pay to sit around here and look at me.
Hey, I heard Bishop saying on the air this morning. He was saying that, well, I'll be here at 10, but I'm here in the building, but I'm not in the studio yet. He said he's a very busy person, and I am. A lot of people don't realize how busy I am. They think I'm just sitting here playing music all day. I wish.
Yeah, if it was that easy.
If it was that easy, he would do it himself.
Exactly.
Yeah, I tell some of my buddies, I'm like, well, I need to go and get me a little rest. What have you done all day? You haven't done anything but sit down and play music. Yeah, right.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Rosemary.
Hi, how are you, Bill?
I'm fine, thank you. Glad I got you.
Yep, here I am, waiting on my bi-weekly call.
Okay, I'm doing a Valentine's Day tribute. We're playing an old Everly Brothers song, "Let It Be Me."
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so leading into that, and I hope everything's going well for you. I really do.
Thank you. I would thank you for that very generous donation. You are too sweet to us.
You have 9 seconds.
Okay, we got about 8 seconds, and you deserve much more than that, my friend.
Well, that and everything that you've done on the radio.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Again, this is You Decide. We're on 970 AM and WRCS, and we get you that usual segment where Dr. Rosemary Fernandez Stein comes on and we discuss parenting, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess. Anyway, I remind you again that Dr. Stein is a candidate for the superintendent of DPI, and I'm not even going to ask you to comment on this, but I'm just going to share you all some information that Senator Berger put out just this week, that he was calling on DPI not to divert the money that was put there for reading and use it to pay salaries at DPI. Can you believe that, ladies and gentlemen? That's what the senator had to say. So we do need some changes in DPI, and Mr. Lady's the one to do it. Anyway, I know we're talking parent, Rosemary, but I wanted to get that in.
Oh, well, thank you, Bill. Yes, I think that, every penny of our money should be used more for our students and their outcomes. Certainly, making sure that our teachers are well paid, that's very important. But I would say that our administrators, just like myself in the clinic, come last. I'm the last one to be paid in the payroll. And I would think that a spirit of leadership would do the same thing. Our teachers, but our administrators, it's not it being an afterthought, but the spirit of leadership would say that we pay ourselves when we know that our job isn't fulfilled. And the most important product that we put out in education is actually teaching and the outcome of the students, not just an administrative burden. But it's very important to have a great product. And right now, I'm sorry to report that I do not conclude that we have a great product in North Carolina. But you know what, guys? We can. We can have a great product and great outcomes in North Carolina again, and that's through classical education. But let's talk a little bit about that, because I've been sort of, let's say, a little bit in the weeds talking about a bit of classical education and what we need to be doing in schools and how parents can assess whether what they're doing in schools, especially in the early grades, is matching up. Because I saw a little girl yesterday, and I wanted to bring this up to you. She's a 10-year-old. She's in 4th grade, and mom brought her in because she's doing poorly in school. She was more and more becoming a little bit of a behavior problem, very antsy, walking around, talking in class, and it just seems to be spiraling. When I asked mom how she's doing at home and whether she's very mouthy or very poorly behaved, she said no. I mean, she can get a little bit out of line, but for the most part, she's not a poorly behaved girl. So we went over the things that are happening and the mom's concerns and a history of she's been doing poorly in school all along. And in third grade, they actually told her the mom last year that she was going to be left behind. Well, lo and behold, she wasn't left behind when she started the school again. And mom was surprised to see that they put her in fourth grade. Now, mom didn't get engaged in that and say, that's strange. All along, they were telling me that she wasn't going to succeed. And now they put her back in fourth. They put her in fourth grade instead of following through with third grade like they said they would. So we're talking about reading. We're talking about math, and I pull out my Noah Webster's reading primer and said, let's go for towards the end of the first grade to see how you're reading. And it was very quick to be able to assess that this young lady was reading at about a first grade level. I would say somewhere into the half of the year. She finished reading her passage, which wasn't very long, maybe had about 3 paragraphs. It took much longer because she stumbled over words, was guessing a lot of them, was interposing words that weren't actually there. And I asked her at the end, I said, okay, so what was this talking about? She was not able to answer. She had a sort of a fuzzy idea of what the whole passage said, but not, and sort of took one sentence out of the beginning, but didn't have any sort of conclusion. So the story did not stay with her. And I was able to make a conclusion of why it was that it didn't stay with her. It's because she's guessing at so many words that by the time she's done with the sentence, she doesn't know what the sentence was actually trying to convey to her. But imagine sentence after sentence, you're doing the same thing, and you don't know what the paragraph means. And then after that, you don't know what the 3 or 4 paragraphs meant. So that means that whole page was lost to her. So she read the words, she stumbled over them, and at the end, she didn't get anything from what she read. And so that's the problem. She was passed from one year to the other, even though she didn't get reading. And the reason that she didn't get reading is because she was taught on the sight word method only. And when she can't guess the word, she sort of tries to sound out the word, but doesn't understand how to do that. So she messes up more than she gets it right when she isn't able to guess the word. And so she was left behind in first grade. And now she's in fourth grade. And you tell her something, and she's able to shoot back what you said and make great conclusions. In fact, this young girl wants to be a chef. And she said, no, I want to be a chef of a really fancy restaurant, and I want to have a dinner restaurant only. And I love the chef programs and the cooking programs, and I try to cook at home. I said, but to be able to own your own business, you need to understand math and how to make a budget. She's looking at me like I'm saying something foreign to her. And I said, and also to be able to run your business and tell other people what to do, you need to be able to have, you need to think straight. But to be able to understand recipes and follow through with them, you need to be able to read well and understand what the recipe is about. You see, you're missing all the things way down here that you need to be able to be a great chef. So how do we get this job done? I asked her, and she said, by learning how to read and do my math. I said, okay, I think that you just said the first step to getting this done is that we need to reteach you how to learn and how to do math, because now you understand what role all of that has to play and where you want to get when you grow up. And so I taught Mom how to teach her how to read phonetically, and we went over the Noah Webster's and how I wanted her to drill the short vowels, the long vowels, and the consonants and everything. And Mom said that she'll get it done. She'll come back in a month, and there will be some progress. But the only avenue that the teachers were seeing right now was to put her in an IEP, where she was going to get individualized education methods program, so that they could sort of, in an essence, in a sense, it would be sort of dumbing down education so that she's able to pass the test. This kid doesn't need that. What she needs is to go back to the basics so that she's able to rise herself up to being a fourth grader again. And there in lies the problem. And that's what I want you, that's the message that I want the parents that are listening to take home. If your child is not reading well, then go back to simple reading in first grade and see how your child is reading. Are they guessing or are they sounding it out? When you say sounding it out, are they really able to understand what sounded out means? Or are they having trouble with that and they're still guessing and saying block instead of black, etc.? If that's what they're doing, you need to roll it back to simple reading. Don't be frustrated at the beginning, but when in just about 8 weeks, you're able to go through the Noah Webster primer and have them read through it and understand how to read, they'll start getting, enjoyment out of reading. I've had this happen so many times, I can't count it anymore, where I've had kids in 3rd and 4th grade who didn't know how to read. You re-taught them how to read, and now they're avid readers. Children's brains are made to love to read. Let's build readers, and then you'll build learners.
And children's brains are very adaptable to situations, so if they can't do something, they'll find a way to survive around it.
That's right, and that's what she was doing. She was just guessing the words, but making up for it in very difficult ways. And so she was bored out of her mind in school because everything was based on reading, and she couldn't catch up. But when you were able to sort of explain things or show her a video, then she's able to do it to answer the questions well verbally, but still not in a written format.
And I would also say, parents, that once you get this going and you see the child coming back, you're going to hit vacation time, you're going to hit summer. You need to make sure that you don't lose that. And, Barnes & Nobles has some great books. You can get them online in a lot of places on simple phonics if you don't know what we're talking about. You can get some books to have the kids read over the summer. The libraries have books they'll lend you. But again, it's like anything else. If you don't use that skill you're developing, you take 2 months off from it, you're going to lose it. You're going to go back 3 steps. And you don't want to go backwards again.
And just, you made me think about something that was very important. You can buy these on Amazon. One is the Noah Webster Reading Primer. It costs about $11, even with shipping. And you can get them used. The other one that I've heard about, and I haven't researched this one. I think it's something like a McGravy reader, and I looked at it online. But that one is also excellent. But those are 2 very good phonics primers that go through the simple, the consonants, the short vowels, the long vowels, and drills it until a kid understands how to read.
Parents, and again, with what Dr. Stein is telling you, it's important to go back to a level that you can get an assessment on, and you can't feel bad about it. I mean, consider it like you had a shoulder surgery or arm surgery, and you got to go through therapy to build the arm back up again. And you used to be able to lift 100 pounds of weight, now you lift 5. Eventually, you'll get back to where you need to be. So that's what it is. It's a remedial program to rejuvenate skills.
And if you as parents, you're too busy, see if you can find a high school student, maybe a college student that you can pay a couple of bucks for, but also grandparents are a great resource for this. And you don't need that much time. I tell the parents that to be able to get them to read in about 8 to 10 weeks, what you need is 20 minutes a day. That's not that much time. Imagine saving your child's life by dedicating 20 minutes a day.
And you might even consider, contacting Boy and Girl Scouts or programs like that who have to do community service things and, carefully screen who you're hiring, but they might come along and just help you out for no cost to get their merit badges.
Yes, that's a great idea. And when you're doing that, the other skill to build up is the writing skill. Children don't know how to write anymore and how to do cursive. The General Assembly put a new law, I think it was 2 years ago, where cursive had to be taught in schools. But guess what? It is not being implemented. So that's not called a failed implementation. That's a no implementation. So from the voice of our legislators who very rightly decided that cursive was very important to the development of our children, it's not occurring in our schools. And I don't know where the breakdown was. It was wrong.
I would think that because so much is being done on the computers, and that's the direction people are going on, the signature doesn't exist anymore. Even us, most of the time, we just sign signature on file with this type of operation. But for those of you who are not sure what cursive is, that's literally writing something like when you sign your name, that's cursive writing. So, and it's a lost art lately in our schools. And yes, Dr. Stein is absolutely correct. There was a law passed, and it is not largely being ignored.
Yeah, and I think it's because it's thought of sort of as an afterthought. And cursive should not be an afterthought because it develops very fine motor skills. That's why we don't have the artists that we used to have and the creative people, because before you're creative, you have to know how to do it right.
I hate to be somewhat cynical, but one of the reasons you don't see it is because it's not tested.
You don't see it because, I'm sorry?
Because it's not tested.
You're right. It's not tested.
I mean, computer skills are tested.
If
They have to demonstrate.
then you will need to improve it. Oh, I like that.
You know, it's simple because, you know, computer skills became part of the 8th grade move-up program a few years ago. And so they teach that now. It used to be called keyboarding. Now it's computer skills. But it's tested, and therefore you're accountable for it. You know, right now, cursive writing is not accountable.
I like that. That opened my eyes, because now I'm going to take a look to see what is not tested, because that will probably shed a light on areas that our children are not doing well.
And I guarantee you, with the pressure for testing that's on staff nowadays, they're probably ignoring a lot of what they could be doing. Geography has gone down the tubes for the most part. You go in a lot of areas, they just don't do it anymore because they're too busy. In many cases, in my experience in New York and down here in North Carolina, especially at the lower, in the non-high school levels below that, they will convert. And, you know, I used to see social studies teachers spending more time on writing and reading because it wasn't tested at those levels. And therefore the kids are being shorted coming forward on that. So that's an issue.
Well, those are great points. I'm making notes about things to bring up,
and science gets sucked in at the middle school and the lower levels. In many cases, unless there's a test there for it, they're going to end up doing a lot of extra math work and possibly reading too. I know that in, you know, my grandkids in New York, I went and complained once because they were doing writing and and reading and essay skills in all these classes, and they weren't getting any history, or they were getting a watered down version. So we have to be careful of that.
Well, point well made, and I've made my notes about history and science. And one of the things that I find interesting also is that I will talk to the parents, and the parents will tell me, oh, he's doing poorly in math and poorly in reading, but he's doing well in science. I'm like, well, how do you learn but by reading? And so how can they do well, and how do you test?
And how do you do scientific measurement
by writing and expressing what they've read?
And how do you do scientific measurement without doing math?
And so how are they doing well in science? How do we measure that they're doing well in science, and they're getting like B's and A's in science, but C's and D's and F in math and in reading? And it just doesn't make sense. Are they answering questions just orally, and is that how the tests are being given? And these are not students that are in IEP classes and individualized education programs.
Well, I've always said, you know, and you know, New York was not the role model for anything, but the state tests down here, the way they're administered, it's basically, you know, it depends on the number of questions, but it's all multiple guesses, I called it. You know, you can bubble in numbers, and sometimes you get lucky. But, you know, at least in New York, they were forced to write an essay at the high school level, and there was systems put in place for groups to grade it, so we try to take out as much unfairness as possible in grading it. But it was beyond just bubbling, because right now the way the system works is the school gives this bubble exam, and then it's sent to district-wide, is corrected locally based on the information sent from the state. And then again, I've said this at an earlier show, what becomes a problem for the staff is that they're not allowed, when they get results back of a class that took a test, you know, the state doesn't tell them that Johnny Jones missed concepts 1, 7, 8, and 12. It simply says that 20% of the kids in that class missed this concept, 30% missed this one, 20% missed this one. So if you're working with Johnny, you don't necessarily be doing the right thing because you don't know that information.
That's wrong. It's the person who gave the test should be correcting the test and should have access to those answers even before she sends them out. If you're going to process and think about the administrative burden and the cost of the taxpayer about having to send them out and put them into the computer system and all that.
It's done locally within the district. I mean, your central office would have someone there that will correct all the tests and send the results.
Yeah, but it worked very well when the teacher was doing it.
Well, I agree. And the other, when you start looking at some of those results, you wonder if people are just bubbling. And the other thing is, when I was at a meeting, and granted, now this is a good 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I questioned the state exams to somebody, they told me that they were basically designed at that point to test curriculum.
Oh my!
But they were then using them to an individual. So there's a problem there, and I don't think granted I've been out for about 5 years now, but I don't think that's changed.
That's a great concept. We shouldn't be testing curriculums. We should be assessing our students.
Well, yeah, but that's the problem with how they're assessing it. That's why they can tell you 30% of the kids miss this question, so you know that the curriculum is not strong enough in that area. It's not the individual kids; it's a curriculum test.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Well, that was really food for thought, right there, and all that started with talk about phonics-based teaching and versus what we're doing now with the whole word. So I saw that young girl yesterday, and I'm hoping to be able to give you an answer how she starts to do within 4 weeks. But I'm hoping that her self-confidence increases and that she starts thinking about how does this all play into what I'm doing day by day? Why is it important to get up in the morning and go to school? And parents, if you don't give that vision to your students, why should they have it? Why should they know that they're doing that so that they are successful in life and so that they're able to be great moms and dads and husbands and wives and church members and have a good profession someday? If you don't tell them, they don't know. And one more thing, parents, because this one really, really gets me, that I go into a room and children don't even know how to say hello anymore. So I'll go into a room and I'll say, good morning, how are you? And they'll look down on the floor and mumble a couple of words. I have no idea what they've just said. I think it's probably good morning back, but they're looking at the floor and they're mumbling. And I will always stop what I'm doing to look at the child, put my hand out and say, good morning. I am so happy to see you. So how are you? The child's lost. He doesn't know how to interact with an adult. Doesn't know how to interact, in a normal sense with children either, but certainly not with adults. So then I go over how that child is supposed to act in a very gracious way, of course. And I said, this is how we address adults when adults have addressed us. So look at this, and you're going to do the same thing. So you're going to look at me in the eyes, you're going to put your hand out, you're going to give me a nice firm handshake, and you're going to say, when I say, hello, how are you? You're going to say, I am fine, how are you, ma'am? And they'll do it, and they'll kind of be a little bit shy to start with. And then they get their voice, and they say, oh, I see Dr. Stein is talking to me, and I'm supposed to answer back. Then I'll address the parent, and I say, this is very important, because your child needs to understand that they are a human being with the spirit of the person who made them. And unless you teach them how to interact with other human beings, especially the older ones, and how to have respect for that, but how to act like a person that's going somewhere, they won't think that of themselves. And they won't look at people's eyes and act like they're worthy of being addressed like little men and little women.
Yeah, I'm going to have to cut you here because we're reaching that point, but I'm going to give you one quick charge to consider. When you get to that position at DPI, and we all hope you do, I hope you consider that one of the things that we would ask the schools to do is run some classes at various times, day and evening, for parents because they can't all be there at 5 o'clock at night, teaching them basics on how to teach reading and phonics at home, how to work with their kids, especially with this new curriculum many parents are lost.
That is right. And how to address children so that they become winners themselves, because our children aren't being raised to be winners anymore.
I agree. Okay, we've reached that point, my friend, that I got to say goodbye because we're running out of time. And I thank you as always, and to our listeners, I wish you all an early happy Valentine's Day. And as always, we close with Ray Charles in America.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.